Now we're going to check what type of settings are configurable in the policy groups. For that, we're going to edit the global default policy, and you will see that it's separated into different tabs. We have a general tab, a two-factor authentication, user policy, client application, device configuration, and notifications. Today we're going to talk about the general tab. In here, you will see a different set of settings. The first one that you see here is showing what is the default user interface for your users. Since October 2020, there is a new user interface called UI 2.0. If your users are not ready to make the switch and you want to continue using the classic one, that is going to be deprecated in a year or two. So please keep that in mind. And if you want them to use only the modern UI, you can decide that you want them to use the 2.0 by default. Even if you change the setting, the users can change back to the old UI or back and forth from the old or the new UI. And you can decide to allow them to do that if you change this to yes. And if you don't want them to use the old user interface, you can simply say no on this setting. The other settings that we have here are regarding sharing. And in sharing, we have three options. We have allowable shares, allow private shares, and shares not allowed. This is going to be a rule that is going to overrule any other setting that you have on team folders or network shares. So if you want a specific groups of users to have private shares only enabled, you can decide to do that here, and don't worry about setting that setting for them on different team folders. That means you can have a group for sales team and you can have a group for management, and you want to allow only management to share files or only the sales team to share files, regardless of the setting they have enabled on their team folder or network share. You can change that option in here, or if you don't want users to share at all. In this case, we are going to leave it in allowable share. And we also have two different settings for shares. We have what is the default expiring time for the shares that are created. By default, in this case, it's always going to be 30, but if you want them to be in a different values, let's say, for example, 60 days, you can change that value in here. And you can also change what is the default max number of downloads allowed from that folder or from that file. Let's say you only want the file that you're sharing to be allowed to be downloaded 5 times. You can change this value here. These two values are just the default values. They can be changed manually by the user that is creating the share when it's on the other user interface. However, the share mode, that is not configurable by the users. They are either allowed to share only to private users, or not allowed. The last few settings here are, first is the user quota. This is going to be the setting that you're going to configure on how much space from the FileCloud server are you going to allow your users to have in their My Files folder. So if, for example, I want all my users that go into the default global policy to be 5 gigabytes, I can make that change in here. And we can also configure or to enable or not privacy settings. These privacy settings are special permissions for the users. For example, if you want your users to share files between each other, but you want the user to manage the privacy settings on those share for between the users, you can decide to enable it here or not. You're going to see there this information, how does it look later on the front end. And the last setting here is regarding the recycle bin. As we saw before, the network shares recycle bin settings are in the main storage. However, for managed storage, it's going to be decided per policy group. And per policy group, you can decide which users are going to have a recycle bin enabled or not. If you want files on the recycle bin to be deleted on a frequent basis, let's say 30 days or 15 days, you can set that setting in here. And same as we do on the versioning, we can decide if we want to avoid sending to the recycle bin files that are greater than a specific value. In this case, by default, it comes 100. So if you have files that are greater than this and you want to make sure they are safe, make sure to come into the global default policy and change it for them.
Mm-hmm.